September 14th, 2025. Nakatoma, Uganda. A rural Catholic priest leads 350 souls in the annual procession of the exaltation of the Holy Cross. White cassock gleaming under the climbing sun, brass cross held high like a banner of quiet victory. Without warning, a man steps from the crowd, pours 5 liters of gasoline over the priest's head and shoulders, strikes a match, and turns the morning into hell. For 110 seconds, long enough for human flesh to melt, for lungs to fill with fire and death, Father Gabriel Nkurunziza stands completely engulfed in roaring orange flames while the village screams in horror. Yet when the fire is finally beaten down, he is still standing, still breathing, still alive, with burns that should have killed him in the first 10 seconds, and dozens of witnesses swear they saw a woman in blue robes standing in the flames beside him, holding him upright when human strength had already failed. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. 90 miles north of Kampala, where the tarmac ends and the red dirt begins, lies the village of Nakatoma, for thousand souls scattered across rolling hills of cassava and maize, where electricity flickers on only 7 years ago and the internet arrives in whispers. Here the days are measured not by clocks, but by the sun's climb over the banana groves and the distant call of the muezzin from the little mosque at the trading center. Because in Nakatoma, Catholics and Muslims have shared the same wells and the same sorrows for generations. At the heart of the village stands the Church of Our Lady of Sorrows, built in 1967 with bricks baked in local kilns and a corrugated iron roof that sings like a drum when the rains come. Inside, the wooden pews, salvaged from a demolished cathedral in the capital, still bear the scars of termites and decades of knees. There is no air conditioning, no sound system, only the scent of candle wax, fresh flowers, and the faint sweetness of incense that clings to everything like mercy. For 11 years this church has belonged to Father Gabriel Nkurunziza, 47 years old, born 20 miles east under a thatched roof. Educated in the seminaries of Kampala, where professors urged the bright young men toward comfortable city parishes with marble floors and stipends. Gabriel could have had any of those. Instead, he asked for Nakatoma, for the red soil that stains the hem of every cassock, for the children who walk 6 kilometers to catechism, for the widows who plant beans by moonlight because the day is never long enough. People said he was wasting his talents. He answered that talents are only wasted when they are kept in places that do not need them. Those who knew him spoke the same words. Always. Gentle voice, ready smile, hands forever marked with the earth he helped turn. He baptized babies in a plastic basin when the baptismal font cracked. He married couples beneath a mango tree when the church was too small for the guests. He buried the old with the same tenderness he once used to cradle their grandchildren. When malaria came, he rode his battered motorcycle down muddy paths with paracetamol and prayers in the same box. When a mother lost her child to cholera, he sat with her on the dirt floor until the sun rose again. He was not dramatic, not loud, not seeking attention. He was simply there, day after day, year after year, the way the red soil is there, the way the cross is there. Every 14th of September, the parish honored the exaltation of the Holy Cross with a procession that had not changed in 50 years. 2 miles through the village and back, past the little shops with faded Coca-Cola signs, past the primary school where children pressed their faces to the windows, past the health center where mothers waited with sick babies on their laps. At the front walked the priest carrying the old brass cross that had once belonged to the White Fathers. Behind him, 4 strong men took turns shouldering the mahogany statue of Our Lady of Sorrows, 3 feet tall, carved 20 years earlier by a parishioner who had never studied art but had studied sorrow well. On this feast day, the women adorned her with hibiscus and bougainvillea and wild jasmine until she seemed to float on a cloud of living color. That morning, the sky was a flawless blue, the kind that makes even the poorest farmer lift his eyes and give thanks. By 8 o'clock, the churchyard was already bright with gomesi dresses, emerald, scarlet, gold, and men in their one good shirt pressed crisp despite the heat. Children darted between legs like minnows. Old women fanned themselves with hymn sheets and smiled at memories of processions when they were young and the road seemed shorter. But at 8:30, Father Gabriel emerged from the tiny rectory, white cassock dazzling, wooden crucifix swinging at his breast. He lifted the processional cross, blessed the statue whose painted eyes had watched over Nakatomi through drought and flood and war, and turned toward the red dirt road. 350 voices rose behind him in the ancient Luganda hymn that welcomed the cross and the mother who stood beneath it. Dust lifted in soft red clouds. The sun climbed, and no one, not one single soul, noticed the man standing at the edge of the crowd, clutching a yellow plastic jerrycan and waiting for the moment when the priest would pass closest to him. The procession moved like a living rosary along the red road. Hymn, footstep, prayer, footstep, the brass cross flashing ahead of the mahogany Virgin carried high on the shoulders of 4 sweating men. Children darted in and out of the column waving palm branches they had cut at dawn. Old women walked slowly, rosaries clicking between fingers that had planted 1,000 seasons of beans. The air smelled of dust, jasmine, and the first hint of wood smoke from cooking fires being lit for lunch. No one saw the man who no longer belonged entirely to this world. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. His name was Josiah Muwanch, 32 years old, once the strongest boy in the village football team, once the pride of his mother who sold charcoal at the market to pay his school fees. 3 years earlier, the voices had begun, low at first, then louder, insisting that the priest was a sorcerer who stole souls during baptism, that the statue of Mary was a demon wearing the face of a woman. The health center in Nakatomi diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia, gave him tablets wrapped in little paper envelopes, told his aging mother to make sure he swallowed them every night. But tablets cost money, and stigma cost even more. Neighbors whispered. Children ran when he passed. His mother locked the door at night so he would not wander. But locks are weak against minds that have already left the village. Josiah still came to Mass sometimes, drawn by the bells he had loved as an altar boy, repelled by the voices that screamed the bells were calling him to be sacrificed. Father Gabriel always greeted him by name, always asked after his mother, always slipped an extra packet of biscuits into his hand after the final blessing. Nothing in those gentle eyes ever suggested fear or judgment, only sorrow that one of his sheep was lost inside a storm no one else could see. That on the morning of September 14th, the voices won. They told him the priest was about to offer the entire village to the demons at the second station. They told him the fire would cleanse. They told him he was the chosen instrument. Josiah believed them the way drowning men believe the weight pulling them under is actually saving them. He had bought the petrol the day before from the little station near the trading center, 5 liters in a yellow jerrycan, paid for with the last of his mother's charcoal money. He carried it hidden under a cloth, walked the back paths so no one would ask questions, and waited at the edge of the crowd near the village school where the second station cross stood beneath a mango tree. The procession reached the spot at exactly 9:42 a.m. Father Gabriel lowered the brass cross and turned to face the people, his white cassock already clinging with sweat. Behind him, the 4 men set the flower-draped statue gently on the ground so the children could lay their small offerings at Mary's feet. The choir began the hymn to the Sorrowful Mother, voices rising sweet and clear into the hot sky. Josiah stepped forward. No one noticed until the sharp smell of petrol cut through the jasmine. He moved quickly, too quickly for the mind to accept what the eyes were seeing. He lifted the jerrycan with both hands and poured the entire contents over Father Gabriel's head and shoulders in one continuous stream. The white cassock turned dark and shining. Petrol ran down the priest's face, into his eyes, soaked the wooden crucifix at his neck. People thought at first it was some kind of bizarre blessing gone wrong. Then Josiah flicked the match. The sound was not loud, just a soft pop, like a seed bursting in the fire. But the result was instant and apocalyptic. A roar of blue-orange flame exploded upward, swallowing Father Gabriel completely. His entire body became a torch, head, arms, torso, legs, wrapped in living fire that reached higher than the mango tree. The heat blasted outward like a furnace door flung open. Women screamed. Children were knocked to the ground in the rush. The men carrying the statue dropped it and ran toward the priest, but the heat drove them back, hands raised against a wall of flame no human being could survive. Father Gabriel did not fall. That was the first impossible thing. He stood perfectly upright in the center of the inferno, arms slightly out from his sides, the brass cross still gripped in his right hand. The fire burned with a noise like 1,000 flags ripping at once. His cassock should have vanished in the first 5 seconds. His skin should have blackened and peeled by 10. His lungs should have cooked from the inside by 15. Yet the seconds stretched, 20, 30, 40, and still he stood, a solitary white and gold figure inside a pillar of flame that lit the morning brighter than the sun itself. Miriam Nansabuga, a widow who sold roasted maize at the roadside, would later swear on her children's lives that she saw her. Right there in the heart of the fire, standing just behind Father Gabriel's left shoulder, a woman in robes the color of the evening sky over Lake Victoria, one hand resting lightly on the priest's arm, the other raised as if shielding his face from the worst of the heat. Miriam blinked, rubbed her eyes, looked again, and the figure was still there, serene, radiant, utterly unafraid. 110 seconds. Almost 2 full minutes. Then 2 young men with buckets from the school borehole finally broke through the ring of heat and hurled water that turned to steam before it touched him. Others followed with blankets, with soil, with their own bodies. The flames surrendered with a hiss and a cloud of black smoke that smelled of hell and petrol and something impossibly, inexplicably like roses. Father Gabriel collapsed only when the fire was gone. But he was breathing. He was alive. The smoke still rose in thick black coils when the first scream finally broke loose from someone's chest, and then the village exploded into sound, grief, panic, prayers in Luganda and Swahili, and broken English all at once. Father Gabriel lay on the red earth, his once white cassock now a charred rag clinging to him in strips, skin angry red and blistering from scalp to ankles, hair and eyebrows gone. The brass cross still clenched in his blackened right hand like he had refused to let it fall even in the heart of the furnace. Yet his chest rose and fell. His eyes, miraculously untouched, were open, staring at the sky as though he were listening to music no one else could hear. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. The parish catechist, Mr. Samacula, was the first to reach him. He fell to his knees expecting to cradle a dying man, but Father Gabriel's voice, hoarse, raw, yet unmistakably calm, came through cracked lips. "Bring me the Blessed Sacrament. I want to thank him." People thought the pain had driven him mad. Instead, 2 women ran back to the church and returned with the ciborium. Father Gabriel, lying half-naked in the dirt, raised himself on one elbow, received communion on his tongue, and whispered the same words over and over. Into your hands, into your hands. By the time the ambulance from the district hospital arrived, 43 agonizing minutes later, the entire village had formed a living shield around their priest. Women wailed the Salve Regina. Men stood guard with machetes in case Josiah tried to return. Children pressed forward to touch the hem of what remained of the cassock, convinced it had become a relic. The paramedics expected to pronounce death on sight. Instead, they found a man with second and third degree burns over 70% of his body. No soot in his airway, no pulmonary edema, blood pressure stable, speaking coherently, asking for water and for someone to please check on Josiah's mother. Miriam Nansabuga pushed through the crowd, eyes wild with certainty. She was there. I saw her with my own two eyes. A lady in blue and white, standing inside the fire like it was only light. She held him up when his knees wanted to fold. She covered his face with her mantle so the flames could not take his breath. Others began to nod, then to speak. A teenage boy who had filmed everything on his phone. Look at the video. Mama Maria is there. You can almost see her. People crowded around the cracked screen, squinting at pixels and smoke. Some swearing they saw the outline of a woman, others seeing only fire, yet all of them feeling the same shiver of something holy brushing their skin. Josiah Muwanj had not run far. He stood 50 meters away, empty jerrycan dangling from one hand, matchbox in the other, staring at the place where his victim should have fallen dead and did not. When the police came, he offered no resistance, only repeated in a hollow voice, "The demons lied to me. The fire didn't take him. The demons lied." They led him away gently. No one in Nakatoma had the heart for anger yet, and his mother followed the police van on foot, keening like a woman at a funeral that had not needed to happen. At Nakatoma Health Center, the nurses wept as they cut away the remnants of cloth fused to flesh. By nightfall, Father Gabriel was airlifted to Malego National Referral Hospital in Kampala. The burns unit director, Dr. Sarah Nagawa, a woman who had seen more fire victims than she could count, took one look at the chart and shook her head. "Medically impossible," she muttered to her team. "No inhalation injury after that duration? Cardiac rhythm normal? Renal function already stabilizing? This man should have been dead before the first bucket of water hit him." In the days that followed, the village kept vigil. They filled the church day and night, candles burning until the wax pooled like tears on the concrete floor. The statue of Our Lady of Sorrows, miraculously untouched though it had lain only meters from the inferno, was carried back in solemn procession and placed on the altar beneath a canopy of fresh flowers every hour. Women who had never learned to read prayed the rosary in Luganda from memory. Men who worked the fields from dawn to dusk now worked from dawn to dusk, and then walked to the church to keep watch through the night. And every evening at sunset they sang the Magnificat, voices rising over the red hills like incense, telling Mary that her priest was still alive and asking her, please, not to stop whatever she had started in that pillar of flame. Back in Kampala, the doctors fought their own kind of battle. Skin grafts, silver dressings, morphine that barely touched the pain. Yet every morning the nurses found Father Gabriel awake, eyes clear, asking first about Josiah's mother, second about whether the children had been traumatized, third about when he could return to Nakatoma, because the harvest blessing was only weeks away and the people would need him. Dr. Nagawa began bringing her rosary to work. She had stopped believing years ago, but something in room 12 of the burns ward was making her wonder again. 3 weeks after the fire, the burns unit at Malego Hospital still smelled of antiseptic and disbelief. Father Gabriel Nkurunziza lay beneath layers of silver dressings, skin raw and shining like new copper. Yet every morning the nurses found him sitting upright in bed, praying his breviary with fingers that should not have been able to turn the pages. The grafts took where grafts had no business taking. Infection, the silent killer of burn victims, never came. Renal function, liver enzymes, inflammatory markers, all slid back toward normal as though someone had quietly rewritten the laws of physiology. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God, Dr. Sarah Nagawa, head of the unit and a woman famous for never mincing words, called the team together one dawn. She laid the latest scans on the table like evidence in a trial no one had expected. "Colleagues," she said, voice low, "I have treated soldiers burned by IEDs in South Sudan, children caught in paraffin accidents, mothers who carried babies out of burning huts. I know what fire does. Fire does not negotiate. Fire does not spare lungs for 110 seconds of direct inhalation. Fire does not allow a man to speak coherent sentences 10 minutes later. Yet here we are." She tapped the images. "Take your theories and test them, because mine have all run out." Back in Nakatoma, the village had become a place of quiet pilgrimage. People walked for days, some barefoot, to kneel at the exact spot where the flames had roared. They left roses, rosaries, small clay lamps filled with oil. By October, the patch of scorched earth was covered in petals that refused to wilt under the equatorial sun. Old women swore the scent of jasmine hung in the air even when no flowers were blooming. The mahogany statue of Our Lady of Sorrows, returned to its niche above the altar, began to weep clear tears that ran from the corners of her painted eyes every Friday evening at 6, the hour Christ died. Parishioners collected the tears in cotton wool, carried them home in matchboxes, and watched fevers break and barren women conceive. Father Gabriel insisted on visiting Josiah Muwanj before he visited anyone else. The psychiatric ward in Butabica was a world away from the red hills, gray walls, locked doors, the smell of despair thicker than bleach. But the priest arrived in a borrowed wheelchair, Burns still weeping beneath the bandages, and asked to be left alone with the man who had tried to kill him. The guards hesitated. Father Gabriel simply smiled the same gentle smile he had given Josiah after every Mass for years, and said, "He is my son. Let me speak to my son." What passed between them in that small room was never fully told. Orderlies heard only fragments, sobs, the low murmur of Luganda, the click of rosary beads. When the door opened an hour later, both men were weeping. Josiah knelt and pressed his forehead to Father Gabriel's bandaged feet. Father Gabriel lifted him up, embraced him the way a father embraces a child who has wandered too far into the night, and whispered again and again, "You are forgiven. You are loved. Come home when you are well." The doctors discharged Father Gabriel after only 41 days, record time for burns of that magnitude. He returned to Nakatoma on the Feast of All Saints, carried in the back of a pickup truck because the roads were too rough for the ambulance. The entire village lined the route, singing the Te Deum until their voices cracked. When he stood, slowly, painfully, at the church door, scars livid across his neck and hands, the people fell silent. He raised what remained of his right hand and blessed them. Then he walked down the aisle to the statue that had wept for him, knelt, and rested his scarred forehead against Mary's feet. The congregation saw the tears fall from her eyes onto his burns, and many of them began to cry too, because sometimes grace is too large to witness dry-eyed. That night he wrote in the parish diary with a pen held awkwardly between bandaged fingers, "I felt no pain in the fire, only warmth, as though I stood inside the heart of the Immaculate herself. I heard her voice, not with ears, but deeper, saying, 'Do not be afraid. I am with you. My son still has need of your hands. Everything since has been borrowed time, and I intend to spend every minute of it the way she spent hers, at the foot of the cross, loving the wounded.'" 1 year later, on the anniversary of the fire, the red soil of Nakatoma was carpeted with pilgrims who had walked from as far as Gulu and the Rwenzori foothills. A simple wooden cross now stood where the flames had roared, ringed by roses that bloomed out of season and refused to fade. Father Gabriel Nkurunziza, scars silver against his dark skin, hands still tender but strong enough to raise the host, celebrated the open-air mass beneath a canopy of mango leaves. 10,000 voices answered the responses in Luganda, Swahili, English, and languages no one could name. When he lifted the consecrated bread and said, "This is my body, given up for you," the wind itself seemed to hush, and many swore they felt the same warmth that had wrapped him in the fire. Before we continue, share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Let's see how far the miracles of the Virgin Mary have reached. And if you haven't yet joined our family, subscribe now, because here, each day, we witness the tender love and mighty power of the Mother of God. The diocesan investigation continues, slow, meticulous, Roman. Doctors from Rome, London, and the Mayo Clinic have examined the records, the videos, the lungs that should have been charcoal and are pink and perfect. They argue in Latin and English over unexplained survival and possible spontaneous protective mechanisms. Father Gabriel listens politely when they visit, offers them tea and ground nuts, then returns to the fields with his people because the beans will not plant themselves and the catechism children are waiting under the mango tree. Josiah Mwanj now lives in a small house behind the health center, takes his medication every morning with a glass of water and a quiet, "Thank you, Mama Mary." He carves wooden rosaries that sell in the parish shop and gives every shilling to the mental health outreach. Father Gabriel started with the donations that poured in from around the world. On the first Friday of every month, he walks to the church, kneels beside the priest who should hate him, and receives communion from the very hands that once burned because of him. After Mass, they sit together on the veranda and talk about ordinary things, the price of maize, the new roof for the dispensary, how the roses at the cross never seem to die. Forgiveness made visible, mercy made daily bread. The Church of Our Lady of Sorrows has grown. New walls, wider pews, a proper baptismal font. Yet Father Gabriel insisted the old mahogany statue remain exactly where it has always stood, tears dried, but eyes still gentle. He preaches shorter homilies now, because he says everything that needs saying is written in the scars he no longer hides under long sleeves. When young priests ask him how to prepare for suffering, he touches the ridged skin on his neck and answers, "Do not prepare for suffering. Prepare for love. Suffering will find you on its own, but love, especially her love, will find you in the middle of the fire and refuse to let you burn alone." The world still argues over what happened on September 14th, 2025. Some call it miracle, some call it medical anomaly, some call it mass suggestion. Father Gabriel calls it Tuesday, another Tuesday when God was merciful, another Tuesday when Mary stood where every mother wants to stand, between her child and the flames. He will not claim certainty about blue robes or voices in the heart. He claims only this: he was burning and now he is not. He was dying and now he lives. He was hated and now he is loved beyond all deserving. Everything else belongs to God. Oh, the question is no longer, did the Virgin Mary appear in the fire? The question, the only one that matters, is this: when the fire comes for us, and it always comes, in one form or another, will we recognize the gentle arms already wrapped around us? Will we let ourselves be carried when our own legs fail? Will we come out the other side still able to love the very hand that struck the match? Father Gabriel answers every morning when the bells ring at dawn, and he walks the red path to his little church, scars shining in the rising sun, rosary clicking softly against the brass cross that never left his grip. He answers by baptizing babies, by hearing confessions, by sitting with the dying, by forgiving again and again and again. Write blue robes in the comments if this story has reminded you that even when the flames are at their hottest, even when the night seems absolute, There is a mother who steps into the fire with us and will not let go until we are safely home. May Our Lady of the Burning Heart, she who stood unburned in Nakatoma's fire, wrap you in the same mantle that wrapped her priest, and carry you through every trial until you too stand on the other side, scarred perhaps, but gloriously and possibly alive.